Right now, you are trapped in an identity that no longer serves you. But here's the truth. Who you are is a choice, and you can rewrite that story. This audiobook will teach you how to destroy the old you and rebuild yourself into something greater. Reinvent yourself. Audiobook. Introduction. You've tried the gentle approach, the small habits, the minor tweaks, the comfortable changes that feel safe but never quite stick. And where has it gotten you? Right back where you started, trapped in the same patterns, fighting the same battles, living the same unfulfilling life. The time for incremental change is over. True transformation, the kind that reshapes your entire existence, requires destruction. Just as a phoenix must burn to ashes before it can rise anew, you must be willing to incinerate everything you think you know about yourself. Your limitations, your excuses, your comfortable mediocrity. All of it must go. This isn't about becoming a better version of yourself. It's about becoming an entirely different being. The version of you that exists right now was shaped by past experiences, outdated beliefs, and unconscious programming you never chose. But here's what nobody tells you. That version of you is nothing but a story you can rewrite at any moment. Neuroscience shows us that your brain is constantly rewiring itself. Your personality isn't fixed, your habits aren't permanent, your potential isn't limited. The only thing holding you back is your attachment to who you've been. Most people will never experience true transformation because they're too afraid to let go. They cling to their familiar pain, their comfortable disappointments, their well-worn excuses. They choose the devil they know over the glory they could become. But you're different. You chose this audiobook because something inside you is screaming for change. You're ready to do what others won't. Demolish everything that isn't serving your highest potential. Chapter 1. The Prison of Your Old Identity. Every morning you wake up and put on an identity like a well-worn coat. It's comfortable, familiar, and completely invisible to you. This identity, this story you tell yourself about who you are, shapes every decision you make, every risk you avoid, and every dream you abandon before even trying. But what if you could shed that identity as easily as taking off that coat? Imagine waking up tomorrow with complete amnesia. Every label you've accepted, every failure that haunts you, every "I'm not the type of person who" story gone. In their place, only possibility. No preconceptions about your capabilities, no self-imposed limitations, no comfortable excuses. Just pure potential, waiting to be shaped by choice rather than habit. Sounds liberating, doesn't it? Here's the truth that most personal development books won't tell you. You don't need amnesia to experience this freedom. Your identity isn't carved in stone. It's written in sand, ready to be reshaped with each new tide of consciousness. The only thing making it feel permanent is your commitment to maintaining it. Look at Malcolm X's transformation, a metamorphosis so complete that it required a literal change of name to capture its magnitude. Before he became the influential leader we know, he was Detroit Red, a hustler moving through life on instinct and survival. Prison could have reinforced this identity, becoming just another chapter in a predetermined story. Instead, it became the furnace where he burned away everything he thought he knew about himself. Behind those bars, Malcolm didn't just read books, he devoured them, often reading by the dim light filtering through his cell until the early hours. He didn't just learn new words, he copied the entire dictionary, page by page, transforming himself from someone who could barely write a sentence into one of history's most compelling orators. This wasn't self-improvement. It was self-immolation, followed by rebirth. The key lesson from Malcolm's transformation isn't just about education or determination. It's about the radical act of choosing who you become. He didn't try to make Detroit red better. He burned that identity to the ground and built something entirely new from the ashes. This brings us to Leo, whose story might feel closer to home. Leo had spent years accepting the identity of the quiet one, the person who had good ideas but never shared them, who saw opportunities but let them pass by. His transformation began not with a dramatic event, but with a simple question. What if I'm wrong about who I am? Leo started small, but his approach was radical. He stopped asking, "What would I do?" and started asking, "What would a confident person do?" In meetings, instead of rehearsing thoughts until the moment passed, he spoke up while his heart hammered in his chest. When social invitations came, rather than crafting elaborate excuses, he said yes, while his mind screamed no. The first few weeks felt like an elaborate act. He'd catch himself in the mirror and think, "Who are you trying to fool?" But slowly, something shifted. The actions that once required conscious effort became natural. The identity that once felt like a costume became skin. Within 3 months, Leo's colleagues stopped seeing him as the quiet guy in the corner. They started seeking his input, valuing his directness, following his lead. When a leadership position opened up, his name was the first mentioned. Not because he had fundamentally changed who he was, but because he had finally allowed himself to be who he could be. Your challenge for the next 24 hours is this. Act as if you've been given that clean slate. Move through your day as if you have no preconceived notions about your capabilities or limitations. When faced with a decision, large or small, ask yourself, what would I choose if I didn't know I was supposed to be afraid? At day's end, reflect on this question. How many of your perceived limitations existed only in the story you've been telling yourself? Chapter 2. The stories that shape your reality. If someone followed you around with a microphone all day, recording every thought that crosses your mind, what would they hear? The constant hum of self-doubt whispering, "You're not ready?" The familiar voice of fear reminding you why you can't, shouldn't, or won't. These aren't random thoughts. They're the storylines you've been rehearsing for years, perhaps decades. They've become so familiar that you mistake them for truth. Think about your internal dialogue from just this morning. How many times did you automatically dismiss an opportunity, talk yourself out of taking action, or reinforce an old story about who you are and what you're capable of? These narratives aren't just thoughts. They're the architects of your reality, the invisible scripts directing every choice you make. The most dangerous prison isn't built with steel bars. It's constructed from the stories we tell ourselves. I'm not creative enough. I always mess up relationships. Success just isn't in my DNA. Each repetition of these thoughts adds another brick to the wall between you and your potential. But here's what most people never realize. You're not just the prisoner of these stories. You're also the storyteller. Oprah Winfrey understands this power better than most. Born in rural Mississippi to an unmarried teenage mother, raised in poverty so extreme that she wore dresses made from potato sacks, and told repeatedly that her skin color and gender would limit her possibilities. Oprah had every reason to accept a story of limitation. The narrative society handed her was clear. Stay small, expect little, accept your place. But Oprah did something remarkable. She refused to accept the story she was given. Instead, she began writing her own. Even when working as a local news anchor and being told she was too emotional and not suitable for television, she didn't edit herself to fit someone else's narrative. She doubled down on authenticity, transforming what others saw as weaknesses into her greatest strengths. When she was demoted from her news anchor position to a morning talk show, most would have read this as confirmation of failure. Oprah saw it as a plot twist in a larger story of triumph. She turned that morning show into the highest-rated talk show in Chicago, which eventually evolved into the Oprah Winfrey Show, the highest-rated program of its kind in history. The key wasn't just positive thinking. It was strategic narrative reconstruction. Oprah didn't just hope for a different future. She actively rewrote her story from one of limitation to one of possibility. Every time someone said, "You can't," she responded with, "Watch me." Every setback became a setup for a comeback. Every no became fuel for a bigger yes. This isn't just about success in career terms. It's about the fundamental power to shape reality through the stories we choose to tell ourselves. When Oprah launched her own network, OWN, it initially struggled. The media narrative was quick. Oprah's failing. But she held on to her bigger story. I'm building something revolutionary, and revolution takes time. That narrative gave her the resilience to push through initial setbacks and transform OWN into a successful network. Consider Emma, a marketing executive who had internalized a story about being terrible at relationships. Every date became evidence for this narrative. If someone didn't call back, it confirmed she was unlovable. If a relationship ended, it proved she was destined to be alone. This wasn't just negative thinking. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy shaping her behavior and choices. Emma's transformation began when she realized she wasn't discovering these truths about herself. She was creating them. She started catching herself mid-thought. When "I always mess things up" appeared, she'd pause and ask, "Is that true? Or is that just the story I'm used to telling?" She began deliberately rewriting her narrative. Instead of, "I'm bad at relationships," she told herself, "I'm learning and growing in how I connect with others." Rather than, "I always choose the wrong people," she shifted to, "I'm getting better at recognizing healthy partnerships." The change wasn't immediate, but it was profound. She noticed herself making different choices, not because she was forcing herself to, but because her new story demanded different actions. She started being more vulnerable in her communications, setting clearer boundaries, and attracting people who matched her evolving narrative. 6 months later, when she met James at a friend's gathering, she didn't approach the interaction with her usual skepticism and fear. Instead, she engaged from her new story of being someone who was capable of healthy connection. Their relationship developed naturally, without the usual self-sabotage that had characterized her past patterns. The most powerful moment came when James asked why she seemed so different from other people he'd dated. Emma realized she no longer had to think about maintaining her new narrative. She had become it. The story of being bad at relationships felt as foreign as someone else's memory. This is the secret that masters of reinvention understand. You don't have to accept the story you've been living. Every moment is an opportunity to begin a new narrative. The key is consciousness. Catching yourself in the act of reinforcing old stories and deliberately choosing new ones. Remember, the story you tell yourself today is creating the reality you'll live tomorrow. Make it one worth living into. Chapter 3. Destroying the comfort zone before it destroys you. A ship is safest in the harbor, but that's not what ships are built for. If you stay inside your comfort zone, you might feel safe, but you'll also stay exactly where you are, watching others sail toward the life you want. Every day, you make countless micro-decisions to stay comfortable, avoiding that difficult conversation, putting off that ambitious project, or staying silent when you should speak up. These small choices compound into a life of limitation, where potential remains forever locked behind the walls of comfort. Think about the last time discomfort stopped you from taking action. Maybe it was the presentation you declined to give, the relationship you were afraid to pursue, or the business idea you kept putting off. That feeling, that tightness in your chest, that knot in your stomach, isn't a warning sign. It's a compass pointing toward your growth. Elon Musk's journey exemplifies this principle in action. In 2002, he sold his shares in PayPal and faced a crucial decision. He could either retire comfortably with his millions or risk everything on industries he knew nothing about: space exploration and electric vehicles. Most people would have chosen the safe harbor. But Musk recognized that true innovation requires stepping into unknown waters. When he founded SpaceX, he didn't just hire rocket scientists. He became one. He spent months devouring textbooks on rocket engineering and orbital mechanics. During Tesla's early days, when the company faced production hell with the Model 3, he didn't delegate from a distance. He slept on the factory floor, working 120-hour weeks, learning every aspect of auto manufacturing. The media mocked him. Experts said his companies would fail. Both SpaceX and Tesla nearly went bankrupt in 2008. But Musk's capacity to embrace discomfort, to stay in the fire when others would retreat, transformed him from an internet entrepreneur into someone who's reshaping multiple industries. The key insight isn't that Musk is exceptionally brilliant or uniquely capable. It's that he understood something fundamental about human potential. Your comfort zone is not a place to live. It's a place to visit occasionally for rest. Growth happens in the space between what's comfortable and what's possible. Observe Noah, a software developer who spent years avoiding any situation that required public speaking. His heart would race at the mere thought of presenting in team meetings. He told himself this was just who he was, an introvert, someone who worked better behind the scenes. But deep down, he knew this fear was holding back his career and leadership potential. Instead of accepting this limitation, Noah made a decision that terrified him. He signed up for an improv comedy class. Not a structured public speaking course where he could prepare and control everything, but improv, where he'd have to think on his feet and risk looking foolish in front of strangers. The first class was exactly as uncomfortable as he feared. His hands shook, his voice cracked. He wanted to leave during every break, but he stayed. By the third session, something shifted. He started noticing that when he messed up, people laughed with him, not at him. When he forgot his lines, he learned to play it off with humor. A month into the course, his team at work needed someone to present a new project to senior leadership. Instead of shrinking back, Noah volunteered. Was he still nervous? Absolutely. But now he understood that nervousness was just energy he could channel into engagement. The presentation wasn't perfect, but it was authentic and impactful. His manager later told him it was this moment that put him on the short list for a leadership position. The transformation wasn't just professional. Noah's willingness to embrace discomfort spilled into other areas of his life. He started speaking up more in social situations. He initiated conversations with strangers. He even signed up for salsa dancing classes, something the old Noah would have never considered. Your comfort zone is like a muscle. It can be stretched and strengthened through consistent exposure to challenge. Each time you deliberately step into discomfort, you expand your capacity for growth. The key is to start small but stay consistent. Discomfort is the doorway to everything you want. Step through it daily, and soon, what once terrified you will become second nature. Ask yourself, where in my life have I been choosing comfort over my potential? What action am I avoiding simply because it scares me? Now go do it. Chapter 4. Breaking free from the prison of others' opinions. Imagine standing on stage, ready to deliver an important speech. Your heart pounds, your hands sweat, and suddenly all you can think about is, what if they laugh? What if I mess up? What if they think I'm a joke? This moment, this paralyzing fear of judgment, isn't just about public speaking. It's the same force that stops you from pursuing your dreams, expressing your true self, or making bold moves in your career. Think about how many decisions you've made today based on what others might think. The outfit you chose, the words you carefully selected in that email, the opinion you held back in that meeting. Each of these moments represents a small surrender of your authentic self to the imagined judgment of others. But what if I told you that the only reason you fear this moment is because you've spent years training yourself to care too much about what others think? What if, starting today, you could rewire your mind to stop giving a damn about opinions that don't matter? Lady Gaga's transformation from Stefani Germanotta to global icon perfectly illustrates the power of breaking free from others' opinions. In her early career, music executives told her she was too theatrical, too weird for mainstream success. Fellow students at New York University's Tisch School of the Arts created a Facebook group mocking her ambitions. She faced constant criticism about her appearance, her style, and her unconventional approach to music. Most people would have dimmed their light in response to such judgment. They would have toned down their personality, adjusted their style, or worse, given up entirely. But Gaga did something remarkable. She amplified everything that made her different. When critics called her outfits too outlandish, she wore a dress made of raw meat to the MTV Video Music Awards. When they said her music was too theatrical, she turned her performances into elaborate artistic statements. The result? She didn't just succeed, she revolutionized pop culture. Her debut album, The Fame, sold over 15 million copies worldwide. But more importantly, she created a movement of self-acceptance, inspiring millions to embrace their own uniqueness. Her journey wasn't just about music. It was about the power of authentic self-expression in the face of judgment. But here's what most people miss about Gaga's story. Her freedom from others' opinions wasn't something she was born with. It was a skill she deliberately developed. Every time she faced criticism and chose to stay true to her vision, she strengthened her immunity to judgment. Each bold choice built upon the last, creating a foundation of unshakable self-trust. This same transformation is available to you. The prison of others' opinions exists only because you've accepted its walls as real. But these walls are paper-thin illusions, ready to collapse the moment you stop believing in their power. Consider Mia, a marketing executive who spent years playing it safe. She had brilliant ideas for campaigns, but always presented the most conservative options in meetings. She dreamed of starting her own agency, but worried what her colleagues would think if she failed. Her wardrobe was a sea of neutral colors, despite her love for bold patterns and bright hues. She was living at half volume, turning down her own light to avoid drawing attention or criticism. Then came what she calls her liberation experiment. For 1 week, she committed to making decisions based solely on what she wanted, not what others might think. On Monday, she wore a bright yellow pantsuit she'd bought months ago but never had the courage to wear. Her heart raced as she walked into the office, but by lunch, she realized something profound. Most people were too focused on their own lives to spend more than a passing moment thinking about her clothes. Emboldened by this realization, she pitched her most innovative campaign idea in Tuesday's client meeting. Yes, some people looked skeptical. Yes, one colleague rolled his eyes. But the client loved it, later calling it exactly the fresh thinking we needed. The criticism she had feared for so long turned out to be far less devastating than her imagination had suggested. By Wednesday, Mia was on a roll. She signed up for stand-up comedy classes, something she'd always wanted to try but had been too afraid of looking foolish. Her first performance was far from perfect. She stumbled over words, and not every joke landed. But she survived. More than that, she felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. The most surprising discovery came by week's end. The more authentically she expressed herself, the more others were drawn to her. Her confidence attracted opportunities. Colleagues started coming to her for creative input. A senior executive noticed her transformed presence and invited her to lead a major project. The irony, Mia later reflected, is that I spent years dimming my light because I thought it would make others more comfortable. But by playing small, I was actually making everyone around me less comfortable. They could sense my hesitation, my lack of authenticity. When I finally gave myself permission to be fully myself, it gave others permission to do the same. This is the secret that those who've broken free from the prison of others' opinions understand. Most people are too busy worrying about themselves to spend significant time judging you. And those who do judge, they're usually projecting their own fears and limitations onto you. Their opinions say more about them than they do about you. Think about the last time you saw someone doing something boldly authentic, wearing an unusual outfit, sharing an unconventional viewpoint, or pursuing an ambitious goal. Did you spend more than a few moments thinking about it? Did it affect your life in any meaningful way? Probably not. Yet we convince ourselves that others are constantly evaluating and judging our every move. The path to freedom from others' opinions isn't about developing a thick skin or pretending not to care. It's about recognizing that most of the judgment we fear exists only in our minds. It's about understanding that every moment spent worrying about others' opinions is a moment stolen from living our authentic life. For the next 48 hours, do something that scares you because of what others might think. Post that opinion. Wear that outfit. Speak up in that meeting. The moment you stop letting external voices control your actions is the moment you start reclaiming your life. Chapter 5. The Death of Your Old Self. There's a reason people stay in toxic relationships, unfulfilling jobs, and self-destructive habits for years. They don't want to lose the familiar. Even when their old life is suffocating them, the fear of stepping into the unknown keeps them chained. But here's the truth. You cannot reinvent yourself without first burying the old you. And yes, it's going to hurt. The pain you feel when letting go isn't weakness, it's the price of transformation. Think about a snake shedding its skin. The process is uncomfortable, vulnerable, and necessary for growth. Without this shedding, the snake would be trapped, unable to expand into its next phase of life. Your reinvention demands the same courage. Your old identity might have served you well at one point. It protected you, helped you survive, gave you a sense of belonging. But now it's become a cage, a comfortable prison that's keeping you from your true potential. The habits, relationships, and beliefs that once sheltered you are now the very things suffocating your growth. Arnold Schwarzenegger's journey exemplifies this principle with stunning clarity. By 1975, he had achieved what most would consider the pinnacle of success in bodybuilding: 6 consecutive Mr. Olympia titles. He was the undisputed king of his domain, respected and revered. His identity was firmly established. The safe choice would have been to stay in that world, collecting more titles and basking in the glory of being the best. Instead, he did something that seemed insane to many. He walked away from active competition to pursue acting. The transition was brutal. Hollywood executives couldn't pronounce his name. His accent was considered too thick, his muscles too big. He was told repeatedly that action stars needed to be smooth-talking Americans, not Austrian bodybuilders. Some casting directors laughed him out of their offices. But Schwarzenegger understood something crucial about reinvention. Your past success can become your biggest obstacle if you let it define you. He refused to be just the bodybuilder. He took acting classes, worked with speech coaches, and strategically chose roles that would help him transition from physical performer to legitimate actor. The result? He became one of the highest-grossing actors in Hollywood history, but he didn't stop there. When he decided to enter politics, he faced the same skepticism. People said an actor couldn't be taken seriously as a governor. Once again, he had to shed his established identity to embrace a new challenge. He served 2 terms as governor of California, proving that reinvention has no limits when you're willing to let go of who you used to be. What's most remarkable about Schwarzenegger's story isn't just the success he achieved in multiple fields. It's his willingness to risk everything he'd built each time he decided to evolve. He understood that holding on to past identities, even successful ones, would only limit his future potential. This brings us to Jason, whose story might hit closer to home for many of you. Jason had built his entire social identity around being the funny guy, the one who could always be counted on for a joke, who never took anything too seriously. This role had served him well through high school and college, earning him friends and social acceptance. It was comfortable, safe, predictable. But as he entered his late 20s, something began to shift inside him. He started feeling empty after social gatherings where he'd played his usual role. The laughs he generated felt hollow. Deep down, he knew he wanted more, to be taken seriously, to achieve meaningful goals, to build something substantial with his life. The first signs of change were subtle. He started reading self-improvement books instead of scrolling social media. He began waking up early to work out before his job. He set ambitious career goals and started taking night classes to develop new skills. The reaction from his social circle was immediate and harsh. "Why are you being so serious all the time?" they'd ask. "You've changed," they'd say, as if it was an accusation. His best friend since high school even staged what he called an intervention, worried that Jason was losing himself. What his friends didn't understand was that Jason wasn't losing himself. He was finding himself. The funny guy persona had been a mask he'd worn for so long he'd forgotten it wasn't really him. It was a role he'd adopted in high school to fit in, and he'd been playing it ever since. The hardest part wasn't the early mornings or the challenging coursework. It was the loneliness. Some friends gradually drifted away. Others tried to pull him back into his old patterns with guilt and manipulation. "You think you're better than us now?" they'd say when he declined invitations to party on weeknights. But as Jason pushed forward with his transformation, something unexpected happened. New people began entering his life, people who respected and encouraged his growth. He found mentors at work who saw his potential. He connected with others at his gym who shared his commitment to self-improvement. Most surprisingly, a few of his old friends, inspired by his changes, began making positive shifts in their own lives. 6 months into his transformation, Jason had a revelation during a therapy session. "I realized I wasn't just letting go of an old identity. I was letting go of the fear that had created that identity in the first place. The fear of not being liked, of not fitting in, of not being enough just as I was. The funny guy persona had been my shield against vulnerability. Dropping it was terrifying, but it was also the most honest thing I'd ever done." A year later, Jason had earned a promotion at work, completed a certification in his field, and built genuine relationships based on mutual growth rather than surface-level entertainment. The friends who stuck by him through his transformation became deeper, more authentic connections. Those who couldn't accept his evolution naturally fell away. The hardest part, Jason later reflected, was accepting that some relationships wouldn't survive my growth. But I realized that any relationship built on me suppressing my true self wasn't really a relationship worth keeping. This is the brutal truth about reinvention. Not everyone in your life will celebrate your evolution. Some will actively resist it. They'll call you selfish for prioritizing your growth. They'll remind you of who you really are, trying to keep you small and familiar. This resistance often comes from those closest to you, because your transformation holds up a mirror to their own stagnation. Your old identity is like a well-worn path in a forest. It's comfortable and familiar, but it only leads to places you've already been. Creating a new identity means stepping off that path and forging your own way through unknown territory. It's uncomfortable, it's scary, and it's absolutely necessary for your growth. Chapter 6. Designing your future self. What if instead of just hoping to change, you designed the person you wanted to become? Think of yourself as a sculptor, chipping away at the rough edges to reveal your masterpiece. Too many people wander through life letting their identity be shaped by circumstances, other people's opinions, or outdated beliefs. But the truth is, you get to decide who you are. Reinvention is not about discovery. It's about construction. Your identity isn't something you find. It's something you forge. Every thought, every decision, every action is either reinforcing who you've been or building who you're becoming. The question is, are you constructing your identity with intention or letting it be shaped by default? Before the world knew him as Muhammad Ali, he was Cassius Clay, a young boxer with raw talent, but no grand legacy. What separated him from countless other talented athletes wasn't just his skill, it was his deliberate construction of a new identity. He didn't wait for permission or validation to become great. He declared, "I am the greatest," long before he had the titles to prove it. When reporters questioned his bold proclamations, he didn't back down. He understood something fundamental about identity creation. You don't wait for external proof to become someone. You step into that identity first, and the proof follows. Every morning, he woke up and actively chose to embody greatness, not just in the ring, but in every aspect of his life. Even when facing criticism and skepticism, Ali continued building his chosen identity piece by piece. He crafted his unique speaking style, developed his showmanship, and maintained unwavering confidence in his vision of himself. He wasn't just training his body, he was constructing a legacy. The world eventually saw him as he saw himself, not because he convinced them, but because he never wavered from his self-created identity. This brings us to Ava's story, which demonstrates how this principle works in everyday life. Ava had always felt trapped in the identity of being average. Average job, average confidence, average ambition. She lived in what she called the middle lane of life, never pushing too hard or reaching too far. But after learning about intentional identity design, she decided to conduct an experiment. Instead of waiting to feel successful or confident, she asked herself a simple but powerful question. If I were already the person I want to become, what would I do differently today? She started with small but significant changes. She set her alarm for 5:30 a.m. instead of hitting snooze until the last possible moment. She replaced her casual work attire with polished, professional outfits that made her feel like an executive. In meetings, she began speaking with authority rather than prefacing her ideas with, "This might be stupid, but..." The first few weeks felt uncomfortable, almost like she was playing a role in a play. Her colleagues noticed the change, and some even made comments about her acting different. But instead of retreating to her comfortable average identity, she used their reactions as confirmation that her transformation was visible. A turning point came during a crucial project presentation. In the past, Ava would have deferred to others or minimized her contributions. Instead, she channeled the identity she was building, a confident, capable leader, and delivered her presentation with conviction. The positive feedback was immediate, but more important was how she felt. Aligned with her designed identity, rather than confined by her old one. 3 months into her experiment, something fascinating happened. The line between acting as if and genuine transformation began to blur. Waking up early no longer required willpower. It was just who she was now. Speaking with confidence wasn't an act. It was her natural way of communicating. The identity she had intentionally designed was becoming authentic through consistent action. The most surprising part, Ava later reflected, wasn't the external changes, the promotion, the respect from colleagues, the new opportunities. It was realizing that I had been the one keeping myself average all along. The moment I decided to design a new identity for myself, everything started to shift. Ava's story illustrates a crucial truth about identity design. Authenticity isn't about finding yourself, it's about choosing yourself. You get to decide who you want to be, and then systematically build that person through daily choices and actions. This process of identity design isn't about pretending or faking it until you make it. It's about consciously choosing who you want to become, and then aligning your actions with that vision until it becomes your reality. The key is consistency. Each small choice either reinforces your designed identity or undermines it. Your task now is clear. Decide right now. Who is the next version of you? Write it down in the present tense. I am someone who. Then, for the next 7 days, act as if it's already true. Watch what happens. Chapter 7. Rewiring your mental operating system. Imagine if your brain was a computer and every negative thought, every limiting belief, every doubt was just outdated software running on an old operating system. Now, what if you could wipe the hard drive clean and install a completely new program, one designed for success, confidence, and limitless growth? Here's the truth. Your thoughts are not facts. They are patterns, and patterns can be reprogrammed. Your mind is the most sophisticated technology on Earth, yet you're probably running it with outdated software from your childhood, past traumas, and accumulated fears. Every time you tell yourself, I can't, I'm not good enough, or this is just who I am, you're executing old programming that keeps you stuck in familiar patterns. But here's what neuroscience has proven. Your brain is plastic, constantly forming new neural pathways based on your thoughts and experiences. This means you can literally rewire your mental circuitry through intentional thought patterns and consistent action. The question isn't whether you can change your mental programming, it's whether you're willing to put in the work to do it. Before Jim Carrey became one of Hollywood's highest-paid actors, he was living in a van, struggling to make ends meet. Most people in his situation would have accepted their reality as fixed, letting their circumstances dictate their mental state. But Carrey understood something profound about the power of mental programming. Instead of allowing his current situation to define his identity, he made a bold decision to reprogram his mind for success. He wrote himself a check for $10 million, dated it 5 years in the future, and carried it in his wallet everywhere he went. But this wasn't just positive thinking. It was systematic mental reprogramming. Every night before going to sleep, Carrey would visualize himself as a successful actor in vivid detail. He didn't just imagine the end result. He programmed his mind to experience the feelings, conversations, and daily life of a successful actor. He walked differently, spoke differently, and made decisions as if he were already the person he intended to become. The fascinating part? Within 5 years, he landed a role in Dumb and Dumber that paid him exactly $10 million. This wasn't coincidence. It was the result of deliberately reprogramming his mental operating system to align with his desired reality. His brain couldn't distinguish between what he was vividly imagining and what was real, so it created pathways to make his mental programming a physical reality. But Carrie's story isn't about manifestation or magical thinking. It's about understanding that your brain will work tirelessly to create whatever reality you consistently program it to believe. If you feed it limitations, it will find evidence to support those limitations. If you program it for success, it will find ways to make that success real. This brings us to Daniel's story, which shows how mental reprogramming works in everyday life. Daniel had spent years running on faulty mental software that told him he was bad at business. Every setback reinforced this programming, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of failure and hesitation. His mental operating system was so convinced of his business inadequacy that he would sabotage opportunities before they could even develop. He'd see a market opportunity, but talk himself out of it. He'd have a great idea, but convince himself someone else could execute it better. His brain was essentially running a program called businessfailure.exe on repeat. But after learning about neuroplasticity and mental reprogramming, Daniel decided to perform a complete system override. He created a morning ritual that would serve as his daily mental installation process. Every morning before checking his phone or email, he'd write in his journal, "I am a strategic thinker. I make bold, intelligent decisions. I am building a thriving business." At first, this felt like trying to install new software on an incompatible system. His old programming would fight back with thoughts like, "Who are you kidding?" and "This is ridiculous." But Daniel understood something crucial about mental reprogramming. Consistency matters more than intensity. He didn't just write these statements, he began looking for evidence to support them. When he made a good decision, he'd note it down as proof of his strategic thinking. When he took a calculated risk, he'd acknowledge it as confirmation of his bold decision-making. Every small business win, no matter how minor, became evidence of his growing success. The transformation wasn't instant, but it was profound. Within 3 months, his decision-making patterns had shifted. Instead of automatically assuming failure, his mind began seeking opportunities. Rather than dwelling on past mistakes, he started analyzing them for strategic insights. 6 months in, his side business started showing real growth. Not because the market had changed, but because his mental operating system was now programmed for success rather than failure. He was making different decisions, taking different actions, and therefore getting different results. The most fascinating shift happened around the 9-month mark. Daniel noticed that his new programming had become his default setting. He no longer had to consciously override negative thoughts about his business abilities. His mind automatically processed information through the lens of capability and opportunity. By the 1-year mark, his side hustle had grown enough to become his full-time focus. The same business ideas that had once seemed impossible now felt like natural steps in his evolution. His brain, running on new software, made success feel inevitable rather than unreachable. This process of mental reprogramming isn't about denying reality or pretending problems don't exist. It's about installing a new operating system that processes challenges as opportunities rather than threats. It's about creating mental pathways that lead to solutions instead of dead ends. Think about it this way. Your current thought patterns are like well-worn paths in a forest. They're easy to follow because you've traveled them thousands of times. Creating new mental programs is like forging new paths. It requires consistent effort and repetition until these new routes become the natural way forward. The key is understanding that your brain doesn't judge whether your programming is good or bad. It simply executes whatever software you've installed through repetitive thoughts and beliefs. This means you have the power to install any new program you choose, as long as you're willing to run it consistently enough to create new neural pathways. For the next 30 days, write down 3 new beliefs about yourself as if they were already true. Read them out loud every morning and watch as your mind begins to accept them as reality. Chapter 8. The power of micro habits. Show me your daily habits, and I'll show you your future. You don't become disciplined, confident, or successful by thinking about it. You become it by what you do every single day. The real reason most people fail at transformation? They rely on motivation instead of habit. But motivation is fleeting. Habits, once locked in, are automatic. Every time you hit the snooze button, skip a workout, or choose instant gratification over long-term growth, you're not just making a single decision, you're reinforcing a pattern that shapes your destiny. Your life today is the sum total of your habits, not your intentions, not your goals, your habits. Think about this. Every Olympic athlete started with a single training session. Every successful entrepreneur began with one productive morning. Every transformative change starts with a seemingly insignificant decision, repeated consistently over time. Kobe Bryant didn't become one of the greatest basketball players of all time by accident or raw talent alone. While others relied on natural ability, he built an empire of success through obsessive discipline and unshakable habits. He was in the gym at 4 a.m., training for hours before his teammates even woke up. This wasn't just about early mornings. It was about creating a system of excellence that became automatic. Known as the Mamba mentality, Kobe's approach wasn't about motivation or inspiration. It was about embedding success into his daily routine so deeply that excellence became his default state. He once shot 800 jump shots in a single session just to refine his precision. When others saw this as extreme, Kobe saw it as necessary. He understood something fundamental about human potential. Greatness isn't achieved through occasional acts of discipline. It's built through relentless, consistent habits. What made Kobe's habit system so powerful wasn't just the intensity, it was the intentionality. Every drill, every shot, every training session was designed with specific improvement in mind. He didn't just practice, he practiced with purpose. This systematic approach to habit formation transformed him from a talented player into a legend. The key insight from Kobe's example isn't that you need to wake up at 4 a.m. or shoot 800 baskets. It's that sustainable transformation comes from building systems that make success automatic. Your habits should be like breathing, something you do without thinking. This brings us to Elena's story, which demonstrates how this principle works in everyday life. Elena was tired of feeling stuck. She wanted to be healthier, more productive, and more focused. Like many, she had tried countless times to transform her life through sheer willpower and motivation. She'd make grand plans, set ambitious goals, and ride the wave of inspiration for a few days or weeks before inevitably falling back into old patterns. But after studying habit formation, Elena realized she was approaching change all wrong. Instead of trying to overhaul her entire life at once, she focused on creating tiny, automatic habits that would compound over time. She started with something so small it seemed almost insignificant. 1 minute of meditation every morning. 1 minute. That was it. No hour-long sessions, no complex techniques. Just 60 seconds of focused breathing when she woke up. It seemed almost too easy, but that was exactly the point. By making the habit so small it was impossible to fail, she removed all resistance to starting. Once that single minute became automatic, she added another micro-habit, reading 5 pages of a book every day. Not a chapter, not 50 pages, just 5. Again, the goal wasn't immediate transformation, but building consistency. After that became automatic, she added 10 minutes of basic exercises. The magic wasn't in the individual habits themselves, but in how they began to stack and compound. That 1 minute of meditation gradually extended to 5, then 10, as her mind craved more clarity. The 5 pages of reading turned into 30 as she developed a genuine appetite for learning. The 10 minutes of exercise evolved into full workout sessions as her body began craving movement. Within weeks, these micro-habits became non-negotiable parts of her daily routine. They were no longer things she had to force herself to do. They were simply part of who she was becoming. The most surprising change wasn't in the habits themselves, but in how they affected her identity. She stopped seeing herself as someone who should be healthy and productive, and started embodying someone who simply was. The results compound far beyond the obvious. Yes, she lost weight and increased her focus, but more importantly, she developed an unshakable trust in her ability to follow through. This new identity began influencing every area of her life, from her career choices to her relationships, all because she understood that transformation doesn't require massive action. It requires tiny habits, consistently executed. Write down one habit that, if done daily, would change your life. Now shrink it down to something so small you can't fail. Do it every day for the next week. Watch how small habits create massive transformation. Chapter 9. The Power of Alter Egos. Superman isn't Superman all the time. He has Clark Kent. Beyoncé created Sasha Fierce to dominate the stage. Even world-class athletes, CEOs, and performers use alter egos to step into their most powerful selves. What if, instead of waiting to feel confident, fearless, or disciplined, you could step into a version of yourself who already is? Your brain doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's vividly imagined. This isn't just positive thinking, it's strategic identity shifting. When you create and embody an alter ego, you bypass the limitations of your current self-image and access capabilities that were always within you. Bo Jackson, one of the greatest athletes in history, understood this power intimately. He didn't just rely on physical training to become the only athlete to be named an all-star in both baseball and football. His secret weapon was Jason, an alter ego he created as a child. When doubt crept in during crucial moments, when the pressure mounted, Bo wouldn't try to pump himself up with motivational self-talk. Instead, he would become Jason. Jason wasn't bound by Bo's fears or limitations. Jason didn't get scared. Jason didn't hesitate. Jason was pure competitive fire. This mental switch allowed Bo to perform at levels that seemed superhuman to others. He could transition seamlessly between two professional sports, something previously thought impossible, because Jason didn't accept conventional limitations. What made Bo's approach so powerful wasn't just the creation of an alter ego. It was his complete commitment to embodying that identity when it mattered most. He didn't just pretend to be Jason, he became him. The transformation was so complete that his performance would visibly shift the moment he made the switch. Sophie's story demonstrates how this same principle can transform everyday life. Working in corporate marketing, Sophie had always struggled with social anxiety. Team meetings were torture. Client presentations made her physically ill. She was talented and had great ideas, but fear kept her voice silent. Then she learned about strategic identity shifting. Instead of trying to overcome her anxiety, which only made her more self-conscious, she created Valentina. Valentina wasn't fearless because she fought fear. She was fearless because fear wasn't part of her identity. Where Sophie saw threats, Valentina saw opportunities. Where Sophie hesitated, Valentina stepped forward. At first, it felt like playing pretend. Sophie would stand in front of her mirror, practicing Valentina's confident posture, her assured tone of voice, her subtle smile. She chose clothes that Valentina would wear, bold colors instead of her usual muted tones. She even created a specific playlist that triggered Valentina mode. The real test came during a high-stakes client presentation. As anxiety started building, instead of fighting it, Sophie asked herself, what would Valentina do? She straightened her spine, adjusted her blazer, Valentina's power armor, and played her confidence playlist on the way to the office. Something remarkable happened during that presentation. Sophie didn't have to pretend to be confident. She was confident, because Valentina wasn't an act. She was simply another facet of Sophie's potential, finally unleashed. The presentation was a success, but the real victory was internal. Sophie had proven to herself that confidence wasn't something she needed to build slowly over time. It was available whenever she chose to step into it. Within months, this transformation spilled into every area of her life. Valentina's influence helped Sophie speak up in meetings, set better boundaries in relationships, and even start the side business she'd been dreaming about for years. The most fascinating part? Eventually, Sophie stopped needing to consciously switch into Valentina. The traits she had originally seen as belonging to her alter ego had become integrated into her authentic self. This isn't about creating a fake persona or hiding behind a mask. It's about using the power of strategic identity, shifting to access the parts of yourself that fear and limiting beliefs have kept dormant. Your alter ego is simply a bridge between who you are now and who you're capable of becoming. Design your own alter ego. Give them a name, a personality, and a mindset that reflects your ideal self. The next time you face fear, step into them, until one day you realize you've become them. Chapter 10. The Unshakable Mind. Imagine walking into any situation, whether it's a job interview, a business pitch, a competition, or a personal challenge, knowing nothing could shake you. No rejection, no failure, no setback could break your momentum. That's what it means to have an unshakable mindset. The most powerful people in the world aren't fearless. They've just trained themselves to keep moving forward no matter what. What if you could do the same? Your mind is like a fortress, and every thought pattern you've developed is either strengthening or weakening its walls. Most people live at the mercy of external circumstances, letting every obstacle chip away at their foundation until they crumble. But there's another way, a path to becoming truly unshakable. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison, nearly 3 decades in isolation, stripped of his freedom, enduring endless psychological and physical hardship. Each day brought new attempts to break his spirit. The guards humiliated him. The isolation threatened to crush his resolve. The physical labor was designed to wear him down completely. But something remarkable happened during those years. Instead of letting his circumstances define him, Mandela turned his cell into a university of the mind. He studied his captors, learning their language and customs. He maintained a rigid schedule of exercise and meditation. He wrote extensively, refining his thoughts and strengthening his resolve. Most importantly, he made a conscious choice every single day to remain unshakable. When hatred and bitterness knocked at his door, he chose forgiveness. When despair crept in, he chose hope. When his body ached from labor, he chose to see it as training. The result? He emerged from prison not as a broken man, but as someone whose mental fortitude would inspire millions. He didn't just survive, he transformed. His unshakable mindset allowed him to lead a nation toward reconciliation instead of revenge, proving that circumstances don't determine your destiny. Your response to them does. This isn't just about positive thinking or forcing yourself to stay strong. It's about building a mental architecture so solid that external forces lose their power over you. It's about choosing your response rather than reacting to life's challenges. Eric had always let setbacks define him. One rejection, one failure, and he'd spiral into self-doubt for weeks. His mind was like a house of cards. One wrong move and everything would collapse. After losing a major client at his consulting firm, He spent days questioning his entire career choice. The negative thoughts would cascade. I'm not cut out for this. Everyone else is more qualified. I'll never succeed. But when he learned about developing an unshakable mindset, he decided to completely restructure his relationship with failure. Instead of seeing setbacks as dead ends, he started treating them as data points, valuable information guiding his next move. He created what he called his resilience protocol. Every time something went wrong, he would acknowledge the emotion without letting it control him, extract the lesson from the experience, develop a specific action plan based on what he learned. The next time he faced rejection at work, he didn't collapse into self-doubt. When a potential client turned down his proposal, instead of spiraling, he analyzed the situation. What could he learn from this? How could he improve his approach? He reached out to the client for feedback, refined his presentation, and used those insights to strengthen his next pitch. Within months, his resilience had skyrocketed. Rejections still stung, but they no longer had the power to derail him. He started taking bigger risks, pursuing larger clients, and speaking up more in meetings. His colleagues noticed the change. He had developed a presence that commanded respect. The most profound shift happened during a high-stakes presentation to his firm's biggest potential client yet. His computer crashed 5 minutes before the meeting. The old Eric would have seen this as a catastrophic sign, letting anxiety overwhelm him. Instead, he stayed calm, borrowed a colleague's laptop, and delivered the presentation from memory. He landed the client. That evening, reflecting on how differently he had handled the situation, Eric realized something profound. Nothing can break you unless you let it. Your circumstances don't determine your mental state. Your interpretation of those circumstances does. This isn't about becoming emotionless or suppressing natural reactions to difficulty. It's about building a core so solid that you can feel everything: fear, doubt, disappointment, without losing your center. It's about developing the kind of mental strength that turns obstacles into opportunities. Think of your mind like a martial artist's stance. A novice can be easily pushed over because they're rigid, fighting against the force coming at them. But a master stays rooted while remaining flexible, using the incoming force to fuel their next move. That's what an unshakable mindset looks like in action. Chapter 11. Action before belief. What if I told you that belief follows behavior, not the other way around? Most people wait to feel confident before taking action. But the truth is, confidence doesn't come before action. It comes because of it. If you want to reinvent yourself, you don't wait for permission. You start acting like the person you want to become now, and reality catches up. Your brain doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's practiced. Every time you act in alignment with your desired identity, you're rewiring neural pathways that make that identity more natural, more authentic, more you. This isn't fake it till you make it. This is literally rebuilding yourself through intentional action. Harvard psychologist Amy Cuddy's groundbreaking research revealed something extraordinary about the relationship between body and mind. In her famous study, participants who adopted power poses for just 2 minutes, standing tall, shoulders back, hands on hips, experienced significant biochemical changes. Their testosterone levels increased by 20%, while cortisol, the stress hormone, decreased by 25%. But the implications went far beyond hormones. These participants performed better in job interviews, spoke with more conviction, and made stronger impressions on others. They weren't just acting confident. They had become confident, all because they changed their physical behavior first. The most fascinating part? These participants weren't told to feel different or think different thoughts. They simply changed their physical positioning, and their internal state followed. This wasn't positive thinking or affirmations. It was the power of embodied action creating real psychological change. What Cuddy's research proved was revolutionary. You don't have to feel powerful to become powerful. You just have to act powerful, and your mind will catch up. This principle extends far beyond just confidence. It applies to every aspect of identity transformation. Think about this. If you're waiting to feel ready before making a change, you'll be waiting forever. The people who successfully reinvent themselves understand that action precedes transformation. They don't wait for permission from their emotions. They give themselves permission through their actions. Vanessa had always seen herself as socially awkward. At networking events, she'd hover near the walls, envying those who could effortlessly work the room. She had read countless books on confidence and social skills, but nothing changed because she was stuck in the trap of waiting to feel confident before acting confident. Then she discovered Cuddy's research and made a radical decision. She would act confident first, regardless of how she felt inside. She studied the body language of naturally charismatic people and began implementing what she observed. She stood taller, maintained stronger eye contact, and spoke with more authority in her voice. At first, it felt completely artificial. Her inner voice screamed imposter with every interaction. But she kept at it, treating each social interaction as an experiment rather than a test of her worth. She forced herself to initiate conversations instead of waiting to be approached. She shared her opinions in meetings instead of staying silent. The transformation wasn't immediate, but it was profound. After 3 weeks of consistent practice, something shifted. She noticed she wasn't just acting confident anymore. She was feeling confident. The fake smile became genuine. The forced posture became natural. The scripted small talk evolved into authentic connection. 6 months later, her colleagues couldn't believe she was the same person who used to hide in the corner at office parties. But here's what's fascinating. She hadn't learned new social skills or changed her personality. She had simply acted her way into a new identity. This same principle applies to any aspect of yourself you want to change. Want to become more disciplined? Start acting like a disciplined person today. Want to be more creative? Engage in creative activities before you feel inspired. Want to be a leader? Start making decisions and taking responsibility like a leader would. Your actions are not just expressions of who you are. They are the building blocks of who you become. Every time you act in alignment with your desired identity, you cast a vote for becoming that person. It doesn't matter if it feels authentic at first. What matters is that you're laying down new neural pathways that will eventually make this new way of being your default mode. For the next week, identify one trait you wish you had. Then, behave as if you already possess it. Notice how your mind begins to catch up with your actions. Don't wait for confidence, courage, or motivation to arrive. Act as if they're already there, and watch as your reality transforms to match your behavior. Chapter 12. Building Relentless Discipline and Drive. Motivation is a liar. It comes and goes like the weather, showing up when things are exciting and disappearing when things get tough. If you rely on motivation, you'll never sustain lasting change. What you need is discipline, the kind that keeps you moving when you don't feel like it, when no one is watching, when quitting would be easier, the kind that makes you unstoppable. Your brain is wired to seek comfort and avoid pain. This is why motivation alone will never be enough. It's a temporary high that feels good in the moment, but abandons you when faced with real challenges. The path to transformation isn't paved with fleeting bursts of inspiration. It's built on the steady foundation of unwavering discipline. Jocko Willink, a former Navy SEAL, lives by one phrase: discipline equals freedom. While others sleep in, make excuses, or wait for the perfect moment, Jocko rises at 4:30 a.m. every single day. Not because he always feels like it, but because he understands that discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. During his time leading SEAL teams in Iraq, Jocko learned that waiting for motivation in life or death situations wasn't an option. The mission had to be completed, feelings aside. He carried this mindset into civilian life, building a multi-million-dollar business, becoming a best-selling author, and transforming countless lives, not through sporadic bursts of motivation, but through relentless, unwavering discipline. His success isn't because of natural talent or lucky breaks. It's because he mastered the art of doing the hard things even when, especially when, he didn't feel like it. While others hit snooze, he's already completed his workout. While others procrastinate, he's executing. This isn't about being superhuman. It's about building systems that make showing up non-negotiable. The power of discipline lies in its compound effect. Small, consistent actions, repeated daily, create unstoppable momentum. This is where most people fail. They overestimate what they can do in a day and underestimate what they can achieve through unwavering discipline over time. Marco had spent years waiting for the right time to start his dream business. He had notebooks filled with ideas, plans, and strategies. But every time motivation struck, it would fade just as quickly, leaving him stuck in the same cycle of excitement followed by inaction. Then he discovered Jocko's work and realized he'd been approaching it all wrong. Instead of waiting to feel ready or motivated, he committed to showing up every day for 1 hour, whether he felt like it or not. No excuses, no exceptions. The first week was surprisingly easy. He was riding high on his new commitment. But by week 2, reality hit. Some days, the work felt impossible. His mind would create endless excuses. I'm too tired. I'll do extra tomorrow. Just 1 day off won't hurt. But Marco had made discipline his new standard. He showed up anyway. Even when the hour felt like 3. Even when he stared at his computer screen, feeling stuck. Even when friends invited him out during his designated work time. Some days he accomplished very little. But he kept showing up. And slowly, something started to shift. The resistance began to fade. Showing up became automatic, like brushing his teeth. He stopped negotiating with himself about whether to do the work. Within 6 months, that one disciplined hour had snowballed into real progress. His business plan wasn't just ideas anymore. It was becoming reality. He had built a website, secured his first clients, and created systems that worked. Not because of motivation, but because discipline had made success inevitable. The lesson? Discipline, not motivation, builds success. Motivation might get you started, but discipline is what carries you through. It's what separates those who dream from those who achieve. Pick one habit you want to develop. Commit to doing it every day for the next 30 days, no matter what. Train yourself to show up even when motivation is gone. That's when transformation happens. Chapter 13. The Price of Growth. Outgrowing your circle. Not everyone is meant to follow you into your next chapter. One of the hardest truths about reinvention is that some people, friends, family, even lifelong companions, will resist your growth. They will try to keep you the same, not out of malice, but because your transformation threatens their comfort. If you are serious about becoming the best version of yourself, you have to ask, who around you is keeping you anchored to your past instead of supporting your future? Your environment isn't neutral. It's either pushing you forward or pulling you back. Every conversation, every interaction, every moment spent with others is programming your expectations, beliefs, and sense of what's possible. The people around you are silently shaping who you become. Steve Jobs understood this principle deeply. His reinvention from a brash tech entrepreneur to a visionary leader didn't happen in isolation. It happened because he deliberately crafted his environment. He sought out mentors who challenged his thinking, surrounded himself with world-class talent, and wasn't afraid to distance himself from those who couldn't match his vision. At Apple, Jobs made difficult but necessary decisions about who could be part of the company's future. He removed talented people not because they lacked skill, but because they resisted the evolution he knew was necessary. He famously said, players hire A players, but B players hire C players, and C players hire D players." He understood that excellence isn't just about individual performance. It's about the collective standard you maintain in your environment. This wasn't just about business. In his personal life, Jobs cultivated relationships with minds that pushed him to think bigger. He sought out conversations with visionaries, artists, and innovators who expanded his perspective. Each interaction was an opportunity to absorb new ways of thinking, to challenge his assumptions, to fuel his growth. The lesson wasn't about being cold or calculating. It was about being intentional. Your growth requires an environment that supports and challenges you. If the people around you are committed to keeping things the same, your transformation will be an uphill battle. Rachel had always been the responsible one in her friend group, the one who made sure everyone got home safely after nights out, who listened to their problems, who kept the peace. But as she began exploring personal development, starting a side business, and setting bigger goals, she noticed a shift in their dynamic. At first, it was subtle. Eye rolls when she declined another night of drinking to work on her business plan. Dismissive comments about her latest obsession with self-improvement. Jokes about how she was getting too good for them. She tried to bridge the gap, to bring them along on her journey, but the resistance only grew stronger. The breaking point came during a group dinner when she shared her excitement about potentially quitting her job to pursue her business full-time. Instead of support, she was met with a chorus of "be realistic" and "don't get ahead of yourself." One friend even said, "You're not the type of person who runs a business." That night, Rachel realized something profound. These friends weren't bad people. They were just committed to the old version of her. Their resistance wasn't about her dreams. It was about their discomfort with change. Every time she grew, it forced them to question their own choices, their own comfort with mediocrity. She didn't make a dramatic exit or burn bridges. Instead, she gradually started investing more time in entrepreneurship meetups, personal development workshops, and conversations with people who shared her ambitions. She maintained cordial relationships with her old friends, but stopped letting their opinions influence her decisions. Within a year, her world had transformed. Her business was growing. She had a new circle of friends who challenged and inspired her, and most importantly, she felt aligned with her true potential. The old Rachel would have felt guilty about this evolution. The new Rachel understood that outgrowing people was part of growth. Make a list of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Now ask yourself, are they helping me grow or holding me back? If the answer is the latter, it's time to adjust your circle. Chapter 14. Outgrowing your comfort. When success becomes a cage. What happens when the life you built no longer fits the person you've become? It's a strange, uncomfortable feeling, like wearing clothes that used to fit but now feel too tight. You worked hard to get here, but now you realize this isn't where you're meant to stay. The hardest part of growth isn't starting. It's letting go of the things that once felt right but no longer serve you. Your current success can become your biggest obstacle. The salary that once represented freedom now feels like golden handcuffs. The career you fought so hard to build has become a comfortable prison. The relationships that once supported you now hold you back. This is the paradox of growth. What got you here won't get you there. Most people stay trapped in lives they've outgrown because they're afraid to let go of what's working to reach for something greater. They rationalize their stagnation with phrases like, "I should be grateful," or "it could be worse." But deep down, they know they're settling. They feel the call to something more, but the fear of losing what they have paralyzes them from taking action. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson faced this exact crossroads in his career. By 2001, he had achieved everything he'd dreamed of in professional wrestling. He was a multi-time WWE champion, one of the most popular wrestlers in history, and making millions. He had security, fame, and success. But something inside him knew there was more. When he decided to pursue acting, many thought he was crazy. Why leave a guaranteed spot at the top of one industry to start at the bottom of another? His first few movies were met with criticism. The wrestling fans who once cheered him now accused him of selling out. The Hollywood establishment didn't take him seriously. They saw him as just another wrestler trying to be an actor. But Johnson understood something crucial about reinvention. Sometimes you have to let go of a good thing to create something great. He didn't just dabble in acting while keeping wrestling as a backup plan. He fully committed to his new path, even when it meant taking small roles and proving himself all over again. The transformation wasn't overnight. He endured years of skepticism, typecasting, and setbacks, but he kept pushing forward, refusing to let his past success define his future potential. Today, he's not just an actor. He's become one of Hollywood's most bankable stars, a producer, an entrepreneur, and an inspiration to millions. His current success dwarfs anything he could have achieved had he stayed in his comfort zone. The lesson isn't about abandoning everything to chase a dream. It's about recognizing when your current success has become a ceiling rather than a foundation. It's about having the courage to let go of the good to reach for the extraordinary. Lucas knew this feeling all too well. From the outside, his life looked perfect. Senior marketing manager at a Fortune 500 company, six-figure salary, corner office with a view. He had climbed the corporate ladder exactly as planned. His parents were proud. His friends envied his success. He had everything he thought he wanted. But every morning, as he put on his perfectly pressed suit and walked into that prestigious office, something felt off. The meetings that once energized him now felt meaningless. The projects that used to excite him felt hollow. He had mastered his role, but instead of satisfaction, he felt trapped. For months, he ignored these feelings. He told himself he was being ungrateful. After all, how many people would kill for his position? But the feeling of misalignment grew stronger. Late at night, he found himself researching entrepreneurship, dreaming about starting his own business. He had ideas, good ones, but the thought of leaving his secure job terrified him. The turning point came during a conversation with his mentor. "Success is not about reaching a certain level and staying there," she told him. "It's about continuous growth. If you're not growing, you're dying." Those words hit home. Lucas realized he wasn't afraid of failure. He was afraid of potential. The idea that he could build something bigger than his current success was more frightening than the possibility of failing. He didn't quit his job immediately. Instead, he started small. He dedicated his evenings and weekends to developing his business plan. He built a network in the entrepreneurial community. He saved aggressively, creating a runway that would give him 18 months to get his business off the ground. When he finally handed in his resignation, his colleagues thought he was having a midlife crisis. Why would anyone leave such a cushy position to start from scratch? But Lucas wasn't starting from scratch. He was building on everything he'd learned in corporate America, just in a new direction. The first year was challenging. There were moments when he missed the security of his paycheck, the prestige of his title. But even on the hardest days, he felt more alive than he had in years. He was growing again, learning again, building something that truly mattered to him. 3 years later, his marketing agency was serving clients across 3 continents. He was working harder than ever, but it didn't feel like work because he was finally in alignment with his true potential. The corner office now felt like a distant memory, a chrysalis he had to break free from to become who he was meant to be. Your current success can be a stepping stone or a stopping point. The choice is yours. But remember this: the universe has a way of making you uncomfortable when it's time to grow. That discomfort you feel, it's not a sign that something's wrong. It's a sign that you're ready for more. Look at your life right now, your career, your habits, your routines. What no longer fits? What feels too small for who you are becoming? It's time to start letting go. Chapter 15. Becoming Limitless. Reinvention as a lifelong process. There is no finish line to reinvention. The moment you think you've arrived is the moment you start decaying. Growth is not a one-time event. It's a lifestyle. The most successful, fulfilled, and powerful people in the world don't reinvent themselves once. They do it constantly. The question is, will you? Too many people treat transformation like a destination rather than a journey. They set a goal, achieve it, and then settle into comfort, believing they've completed their evolution. But life has a way of making that comfort temporary. Markets shift, technologies advance, industries transformation, and those who stop growing find themselves left behind. Madonna isn't just a pop star. She's a masterclass in perpetual reinvention. For over 4 decades, she has refused to be defined by any single version of herself. When critics thought they had her figured out, she would emerge with a completely new persona, sound, or artistic direction. From the punk-pop rebel of the 1980s to the electronic music pioneer of the 1990s, from provocative cultural icon to sophisticated businesswoman, Madonna has consistently evolved ahead of the curve. Her secret isn't just talent or timing. It's her fundamental understanding that relevance requires constant renewal. When her like a virgin persona threatened to define her, she transformed into the controversial figure behind Like a Prayer. When that image became expected, she reinvented herself again with Vogue and the Blonde Ambition tour. Each evolution wasn't just a marketing strategy, it was a complete reimagining of her artistry, message, and impact. Even in her 60s, when most artists would rest on their legacy, Madonna continues to push boundaries and explore new territories. She's not just surviving in an industry that typically discards artists after a decade. She's thriving because she never allowed herself to become comfortable or predictable. Jasmine had already achieved what most would consider a complete transformation. She'd left her safe but unfulfilling corporate job to start her own consulting business. She'd overcome her fear of public speaking to become a sought-after presenter. She'd even transformed her health and fitness, running her first half marathon. By all accounts, she had made it. But sitting in her office one day, looking at her achievements, she felt a familiar restlessness. The same feeling that had pushed her to change her life in the first place was back. Her business was stable, her confidence was solid, and her routine was comfortable. Too comfortable. That's when she realized transformation isn't a checkbox to tick off. It's a commitment to continuous growth. Instead of basking in her success, she started asking herself, what's next? Where else can I push my boundaries? She enrolled in Mandarin classes, recognizing that China's growing influence in her industry could open new opportunities. She signed up for a full marathon, not because she needed to prove anything, but because she refused to let comfort define her limits. She expanded her business into digital consulting, forcing herself to master new technologies and trends. Each new challenge brought back the familiar discomfort of growth, the uncertainty, the occasional self-doubt, the temptation to retreat to what was known and safe. But Jasmine had learned something crucial, that discomfort was a signal she was on the right path. It meant she was pushing beyond her current capabilities, expanding her potential, rather than settling for her achievements. Some of her peers didn't understand. "You've already made it," they'd say. "Why push yourself so hard?" But Jasmine knew better. She wasn't pushing herself because she had to. She was pushing herself because that's who she had chosen to become. Someone who never stops growing. Reinvention never stops. Ask yourself, what's the next level of me? What's the next challenge I must take on? Keep evolving, because the best version of you is always ahead. For the next week, identify one area of your life where you've become too comfortable. Then, set a challenge that scares you just enough to force growth. Remember, the moment you stop evolving is the moment you start declining. Conclusion. You've come far. The journey has been more than just listening. It's been an active dismantling of everything that once held you back. But here's the crucial truth you must understand. The work isn't over. In fact, it's just beginning. You've learned how to recognize and demolish limiting beliefs, how to reprogram your mind for success, and how to embrace discomfort as a catalyst for growth. You've discovered that your identity isn't fixed. It's a choice you make every single day. You've seen how the most successful people in history didn't just change once. They made reinvention their way of life. But here's where most people fail. They treat transformation like a destination rather than a journey. They reach a certain level of growth, feel satisfied, and then stop pushing forward. That's the moment decay begins. That's when mediocrity creeps back in. That's when all the progress you've made starts to erode. The tools you've gained through this audiobook, the ability to rewrite your story, to reprogram your mind, to build unshakable discipline, these aren't meant to be used just once. They're meant to become part of your daily existence. They're meant to be wielded again and again as you continue to push beyond your current limitations. The world belongs to those who refuse to be defined by their past, who embrace discomfort as the price of greatness, who understand that every ending is just a new beginning. You've already proven you have the courage to change. You've already taken the hardest step, beginning. Now, the choice is yours. Will you treat this as the end of your journey, or will you recognize it as merely the first chapter of your ongoing evolution? This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about continuously unveiling more of who you were always meant to be. The person you're becoming is waiting on the other side of every challenge, every discomfort, every moment of growth you choose to embrace. You've come too far to stop now. The world needs the unstoppable version of you that's emerging. Step forward boldly, because this isn't the end of your transformation. It's just the beginning. Thank you for listening and for investing in yourself. I believe in you. Your potential is endless. Now go out there and create the life you deserve.